Hi everyone, welcome to Julie Reads Her Bookshelf. I'm Julie. For those of you who are new to this channel, this is a channel where I read through all of the unread books on my bookshelf until we reach zero, and we are a long way from zero. So today I wanted to do my slightly belated Victober wrap up. So those of you who watched my Victober TBR video will know that at the end of September, I had a look through all of my Victorian books that are currently on my bookshelf, and I really picked out two that I wanted to get through. Now, I thought I would only get through one of these books, which was a choice, if you remember, between Anthony Trollope's Can You Forgive Her and Thomas Hardy's Jude the Obscure. So because these are slightly substantial books for Victober, I thought I would only be able to get through one of them and still manage to live a life. As it turns out, I completely underestimated myself and I got through both. Let's have a chat first about the Trollope, because almost universally when I said I was tossing up between these two books, you guys picked the Trollope. So this is Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. It's the first book in the Palliser series, which I've never read anything by Trollope prior to this book. And I'm not sure that this is where I would have started with Trollope. It would probably be a better idea to start with the Barchester series, because I think there is some crossover between the two series, and the Barchester series predate the Palliser novels. But never mind, this book does sit well enough on its own as the first novel of the Palliser series. And it has that kind of almost Vanity Fair like depths of having an A plot, a B plot, and a C plot. So the A plot really has to do with Alice Vavasor, who Trollope says we should try and forgive. Alice is related to some pretty important people and mostly from kind of a royal background. She's got an independent fortune of her own. But she wasn't brought up with her rich relations. Her mum came from some money and was effectively estranged from her side of the family because she married her dad. So Alice was brought up with effectively her dad's side of the family. But she does have some fortune, and at the start of the book, she was engaged to a country gentleman called John Grey. And this marriage was pretty much looked upon favorably by all of Alice's relations, except, of course, her cousins, George and Kate Vavasor. And Alice had a previous romantic relationship with her cousin George, and he did something that caused her to break off that engagement. And there's more to that side of George later on in the book. But at the start of the novel, we really got this setup where Alice was having doubts about marrying John Grey. She felt like they came from different backgrounds and they have different outlook on life. Alice really wants to live in town. She wants to be effectively a politician's wife. She's really interested in politics, and she really wants to be able to support her husband in a political career. Whereas John Grey was really a country gentleman. He wants to kind of sit around the fire and read and kind of tend to his garden. That's his main joy in life. So increasingly Alice is torn between John Grey, who offers that stability and that country life that she's not really sure she wants, and George Vavasor, who she knows is a bit of a rogue, but she's attracted to the lifestyle that he offers because he's more into politics. He's more of a town guy. So we start the book off with that dynamic in the A plot. The B plot kind of mirrors the A plot in that the B plot centers around Lady Glencora, who is incredibly wealthy. She's an heiress to quite a large fortune, and she was in love with a completely hopeless and also penniless man called Burgo Fitzgerald. And had she had it her way, she would have married Burgo. But her family intervened, and instead of marrying Burgo, she ended up marrying Plantagenet Palliser, who was at the start of the novel on track to effectively become the treasurer. of the government. And so Plantagenet is a politician. He sits in Parliament. He is heir to the Duke of Omnium. Can't say the word. And he's a very kind of stiff, upright character. Also kind of enigmatic in that he either is a total fan of you or he gets completely turned off you, but he has his own thoughts and opinions about people, and you can come in and out of his favor as well. So Plantagenet and Lady Glencora's marriage at the start of the book was not particularly happy. Lady Glencora is this kind of quite a vivacious and slightly silly character. And she's very, very young as well at the start of the book. And she feels like she is still in love with Burgo. She's very much tempted to elope with Burgo, which would have caused an absolute scandal given she was already married to Mr. Palliser. The seed plot's focused on a number of minor characters, the main one being Mrs. Greenow, who is Alice's aunt. And Alice's aunt married a elderly rich gentleman, and she got what she wanted when he died quite early, and she became a relatively young widow with access to all of his wealth. And as a result of that, she was pursued by two men in particular. There's Mrs. Cheesacre, who is a country farmer who's very into farming. He talks about things like manure and his farm work all the time. And he's kind of a very simple but jolly character. Mrs. Greenhou's also pursued by a second man, Captain Belfield, who is, again, one of those slightly roguish characters. He's quite dashing. He lies about his military history, and she knows that he has no money and he needs her more than she needs him. So Mrs. Greenow sort of plays these two men off each other throughout the book, and there's kind of quite a comedic plot line that kind of weaves in and out of the A plot and B plots throughout the book. So altogether, I absolutely love this book. I thought it was extremely entertaining, and even though it's over 800 pages, it read very fast. So I want to thank everyone for recommending it, because I absolutely smashed through this book in record time, despite, you know, working full time and trying to have a life as well. The characters are frustrating. I found Alice and Glencora to be both quite frustrating as characters, but they're also really lovable, and you can readily identify with them. It's not satire, but it definitely has some satirical elements to it. It's not comedy, but again, there's plots and subplots and characters within the book that are extremely comedic. And overall, it all comes together to a bit of a romp, especially towards the end. The ending of the book, you really can't put it down. I absolutely raced through the last 150, 200 pages of this book in record time. So overall, I really, really liked this book. I had such a great time reading it. Thank you to everyone who recommended the Trollop. And I am looking forward to reading more from the Palliser novels, but I'm not totally sure whether I should keep going with this series or whether I should actually go to the start of the Barchester novels, because technically these exist in the same universe as I understand. So the Barchester series slightly predate the Palliser novels. It may not matter, because I certainly did notice none of the characters in this book came out of the blue. They all came with sufficient background for me to follow it. So I'm not sure yet, but this is definitely not going to be the last Trollop I read. He is absolutely so entertaining. He can write. He's realist enough that you don't feel like you're part of some joke, but he is also incredibly good at storytelling, has a real sense of humor and a twinkle in his eye. So I absolutely loved his authorial voice as well. So at the end of September, I had thought that I would only get through Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope in October, because it was quite a sizable book. But as I said before, the Trollope read very, very fast. And I smashed through that book. So I actually had enough time to get to my second ambitious Victorian read of the month, which is Jude the Obscure. Now, Jude is not nearly as long as Trollope, but it's still 500 pages, and I don't find Thomas Hardy to be a fast reading author. He's not dense, and he does keep the plot moving along. He doesn't drag on too much. But having said that, he's not the most cheerful writer, as everyone knows. So I find that I didn't get through Tess that quickly, and I didn't get through this one that quickly either. But Jude the Obscure turned out to be slightly better than Tess. I certainly liked it a lot better than I liked Tess. So it's a book about Jude, who is an orphan, and he dreams about studying at Christminster, which is a fictionalized version of Oxford. And but he comes from quite a disadvantaged background. So he ends up becoming a stonemason while studying Greek and Latin and trying to get into Christminster. But he has many obstacles. Some of them are things that he can't help, like his background and his lack of formal education. But some of it was also, I guess, the result of his own bad choices, which is he ends up in a disastrous marriage to a lady called Arabella. And they were clearly not meant for each other. Arabella ends up leaving Jude, and he then moves on to fall in love with his cousin Sue in Christminster. Now, Sue is a really unconventional character for a Victorian novel. She doesn't want to get married. She really has views of her own. She holds her own as well. She has her opinions, and she really is the stronger person in that relationship between her and Jude. And the two of them spend some happy years together, and but in the end, their life is shattered by quite a significant tragedy towards the last third of the book. And I won't go into too much detail because it will spoil the book for you all about the tragedy. But what I liked about the book was effectively the character of Jude and Sue. Both of them were really likable characters. I didn't mind the kind of struggle and obstacles that they sort of encountered and the poverty that they lived in throughout their lives. I didn't find that depressing. I mean, it's not exactly a cheerful plotline, but the chemistry between them as characters and that kind of idea of them really being soulmates to each other, I really bought into. And I liked the character arc between them, the way they came together. Their reluctance to get married was totally believable. I liked the way they reacted to the tragedy in their life. I found it believable that Sue would, Sue in particular, would react to what happened to them in the way that she did. But the problem I have with the book, and it's a fairly big problem, is that I found the tragic plot twist towards the end to be totally unbelievable. I found the character of Jude's son to be totally unbelievable. It's almost like Thomas Hardy has never met an odd child in his life, because that's just not how children act. And I had the same problem with Tess, which is that I found the plot development towards the end of Tess to be completely hysterical and not credible. So this is the second book in a row now with Thomas Hardy where I got to the end of the book and I just absolutely did not buy the plot development that came. And because it was such a significant plot development, it influenced the ending of the book. So it kind of left a sour taste in my mouth towards the end. But as I said, I enjoyed this better than Tess. I found the characters in Jude the Obscure to be far more likable. And compared to Tess, there weren't as many kind of interminable descriptions of farm work and things like that. I mean, it does help that Jude is a stonemason and he sort of works in the city building churches and colleges and that sort of stuff. So I didn't find there to be kind of that endless descriptions of country life that you got in Tess, which I didn't like at all. So I'm in a bit of a strange place with Thomas Hardy. I read Tess of the D'Urbervilles and Jude the Obscure both this year, and I found his books to be very readable. They're well written up to a certain point, but in both books he does something with the plot that just turned me off the book, and particularly the ending of the book, and left a bad taste in my mouth. And so overall, I don't have that level of trust in him that I had immediately with Anthony Trollope, even though this was the first book of Trollope's that I read. I don't trust Thomas Hardy to come up with convincing plot lines. And I feel like he uses his characters almost as chess pieces to make a broader point. And I don't mind that per se, but don't make it so obvious. I think the problem I have with Hardy, and the reason why I didn't enjoy both the ending of Jude and Tess, is that he made it very, very obvious what he was trying to do. It was like getting punched in the face with symbolism, and I really resent that in an author. So I'm not sure. I still have another book by Hardy on my unread shelf, which is Far From the Main Crowd. I hear that that's a bit more cheerful than Jude or Tess, although I'm not sure how you can get more depressing than Jude. But it's not the tragedy that gets me. It's the fact that I'm not convinced by it. So what do you think about Thomas Hardy? Like I said, I'm not totally sure I want to keep reading him, but I have heard from quite a few people that Far From the Main Crowd is probably their favorite of Hardy's novels. So I feel like I should give him another chance, particularly because I managed to get through Tess and Jude relatively smoothly, at least until the ending of the book. So bit of a mixed bag with this one. So there you have it. That was my October in reading. At the start of October, I had 70 books unread on my bookshelf. I read 2 of them, so we ended up on 68. But of course, one of the rules of this exercise was that for every 20 books I read off my unread shelf, I am allowed to buy 1 book as a reward for making progress. So we started this exercise at 90 unread books. And we got to 70, which meant that I was allowed to buy a new book. And I had no idea what I wanted to buy as like a celebration or a reward. So what I ended up doing is I went to a secondhand bookstore. I was browsing through the shelves for interesting editions of books that I've always wanted to read. And I found one. And that is Moby Dick by Herman Melville. It's in this Reader's Digest World's Best Reading series. I should say, because someone brought it up in the comments in one of my videos, these are not digested versions. These are unabridged versions of books. Reader's Digest had a subscription service where you could get classics off them printed in these beautiful hardbacks with like lovely paper and illustration inside. And I collect these. I'll probably talk about them one day, but they're on the shelf behind me. So because it's an edition I like and it's a book that I've always wanted to read, I decided that this was going to be my celebration book. So we started the month on 70. I read 2 and purchased 1. So we ended on 69. I'm not trying to get through all of my unread shelf within a certain period of time. I have kind of a rough 3-year time frame to do it. But I would like to make more progress on it than sort of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So I think for November and December, I'm really going to concentrate on just knocking books off my unread shelf so that we make a little bit more progress and hopefully get to 65 by the end of the year. So thank you so much for watching, and I will see you probably in 2 weeks.